Today on The Sensitivity Doctor, I had Gary Katz come to talk about why he believes, from a clinical point of view and from the point of view of a man, why men are afraid of women. I was so enthralled with the idea of talking about this with him because he is truly a highly sensitive man. He has a lot of honest perspectives, and he works with people all the time on intimacy at his Intimacy Recovery Center, which is all over the country, honestly, and you can find out more about him in the links. But I really appreciated this conversation with him. We break down things from toxic masculinity to power dynamics to when apologies become repetitive, how to deal with shame cycles, and how we can support and guide our little boys now into a much more sensitive world. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. There was a lot of opinions and a lot of different perspectives we explored, and I would love to hear from you what you thought. So feel free to, drop me a comment, or definitely follow the podcast and rate, if you will, because it really helps get it out to others. And I hope you enjoy the conversation I had with Gary as much as I did as we unpack why men are afraid of women. I am super excited to have you back and dying to talk about this topic.
Okay. All right. Let's do it.
Yes, let's do it. So welcome back, Gary. I really enjoyed our other episode, genuinely, because I began thinking we were going to talk about one thing, which was kind of almost the morals behind sex addiction in a way. And then it went into this completely different realm about intimacy and, fear of intimacy. And I just loved it. But it wasn't even in our chat. I think I saw in passing something you had online where you had mentioned that men fear women.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And I was like, ooh, that's spicy.
Yeah. It is spicy. Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually, I did a whole presentation on it, and I am speaking on that at a symposium in Phoenix in May. I
Oh,
think
okay.
I think it really impacts relationships.
Okay. Well, I'm here for it. And I'm kind of hoping in a way I might gain something personally as well from this.
Okay.
So sneak peek of the symposium, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't give away the cliffhangers, I guess.
No, there's, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that so many messages that are given to boys, and then in turn of men, and then as they grow up as men, create a fear of women. And
Okay.
I see it in my office in a variety of ways. I see it in men who are scared to share their feelings with their partners because they're scared they may upset their partner. So instead, they do everything they can to avoid saying how they really feel. And that could be a big thing, like when you do that, it really upsets me. I don't like it. I mean, that doesn't sound like a big thing, but first I could feel, or it could be like, I don't want to go to this same restaurant again for dinner. Like, it doesn't have to be the substance. It's more about kind of like the process, as we say often, like it's more process versus content. But, and so a lot of men, I think they'll be like either happy wife, happy life type of thing.
Oh, I
Like,
hate that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. If that was like truly the embodiment, if they were if they were truly spiritually there, where I'm going to focus to make my wife or partner or whatever happy, and I'm authentic in it, yeah, that's called giving and loving. It's an act of love. But
Right.
if it's like, and I think that many men, and myself included, all of this is probably true for me. I'm just going to put that out there. Like, either was
I
or
mean, we
is.
research and write about what we feel and experience, so for
Apparently
sure.
so. I've heard that. I read that somewhere. But yeah, we think that like I don't have an opinion, or like I'll just let it go. But instead of letting it go, it's really stuffed. So, I see it a lot. I've worked with couples, like, let's say before weddings, and a groom will be like, whatever you want, I don't care. I have no opinions about the wedding, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden they do. And either they say they don't, but they end up getting involved, or they say they don't and they just get resentful.
So it's interesting you say that or you give that example because I will tell you on the receiving end, we are told the messaging, or at least I heard the messaging, watch out for how your fiance or future partner behaves during the planning process because that's how they're going to be throughout the whole relationship.
Mm,
It's like this kind
mm,
of
yeah.
stamp that's
It's
it.
interesting. I never heard that. It makes sense in some ways. The other thing I tell every couple when they get engaged that I do premarital counseling with is that almost every couple I know has at least one huge blowout fight during their engagement. And it's not a sign of you're not supposed to be together or whatever. I mean, but it's an abnormally stressful time where
Yeah, right.
you're planning probably the biggest event you've ever planned, ranging from like what are you gonna do to create this really meaningful ceremony to express your love to each other, down to like, what are the centerpieces? What kind of cocktail napkin insignia you're gonna have? Who's Where do you sit Aunt Shirley because she's
Oh
not
my
talking to
goodness.
Aunt Bessie?
I
So
think
like
I had
there's
my husband do about 1 to 200 ribbon bows. I
oh
think
yeah.
that's
Yeah. So
I
it's
was in the era of like the DIY, like the David Totera, like
That's funny. And then you have depending on the age of the couple, their family input and pressure, and if the families are paying for things too. So
right.
it's an abnormal amount of pressure. It's not, everyone thinks I'm gonna find the one and we're gonna get engaged and now I'm off. I don't have to deal with the whole dating experience. We're just gonna sit and look in each other's eyes and feed each other's grapes one at a time and feel love and bliss and celebrate our love as we prepare for our marriage. And it's not like that at all.
I'm still giggling at the grape. The grapes. I'd rather
Yeah, and then
strawberries, but
oh, okay, fine. Yeah, it's a little chocolate, a little whiter or
yes.
dark chocolate. Yeah.
I want to go back to what you said about the difference between the energy behind happy wife, happy life versus if you're doing something from like a deep space.
Hmm.
Because that really, I mean, that really rang true because when I hear that sometimes, I mean, I eye roll at it a little bit,
Yeah,
but I do feel like in a way, we unfortunately societally kind of perpetuate it a bit by laughing it
absolutely.
off and just kind of accepting it. And I'm imagining there's like this feedback loop, and it's probably where we're going to go today. I feel like our conversation is going to be just this big loop that's going to come back to where we're starting, right? Because our goal, like my hope as a woman and a wife, is that my my partner, my husband, but my partner, whoever, will be comfortable enough to come to me and tell me how he feels so that I can feel safe, and then in exchange feeling safe then makes me feel more drawn to him, and it's like
Hmm.
this
Yeah,
beautiful
yeah,
tango if it's working well.
yeah,
Now does that happen? Not nearly as much as I would hope.
yeah. I think that many men, I think that many men um, don't know what they're feeling. They've disconnected emotionally from their own feelings. So I think that's part of like the whole raising yourself. I know masculinity has become a political issue and political word. I don't mean it in any of that sense. I just mean as boys in America and many other countries, we're basically told, suck it up, be a man, don't show weakness, don't cry, don't be what are you, a girl? Which is like already puts women one step below men. Like, don't be that. So you're othering them. And so there's all this messaging that already puts women one level below men don't be like a girl. And there's other crass ways to say the same thing. That's all absorbed by men, by boys. And it's, when you make someone less than you, they're no longer your equal. They're now more like an other or an object. And it's only a short step from that to sexual objectification. And it's another step from there to domestic violence or
Yep.
not being careful with their heart, or then assault. So that's where I think a lot of it starts. And not, there's obviously really a wide range of degrees of all of that. But, and then boys learn they can't show weakness. There's a great documentary called The Mask You Live In.
Oh,
And you,
what a
like
well,
masculinity or the masculinity. Yeah.
right. What a well-titled
Yeah.
documentary.
And even I use it with a lot of our groups. Even just the trailer for it, I don't even, is
I
so
have not
powerful
seen
about,
it, but I'm going to
yeah,
watch it and we'll
I'll
put it
send
in
it
the
to you.
show notes
Oh
too.
yeah. Okay,
Yes,
good.
for sure.
So it
Yeah,
really
send it to me so I
shows,
can put it in the show notes.
okay, yeah. So it really shows the impact of this messaging on boys where they can't show weakness. Like when I played baseball as a, I think middle school kid or younger, I remember going up to bat, and if I struck out, we lost the game. I was terrified. I couldn't tell anyone. There's no way I could, I have to suck it up and act tough. And so it's almost impossible for a boy to live in that space where they have to not feel weakness, because when you're in touch with it, how do you hide? It's so hard to hide it. So there's this internal fragmentation of like an exiling the weakness feelings, sadness, hurt, loneliness, all those things. And many times if a boy shows that to their parents or to other people, like I'm sad, they'll be like, stop being sad. Stop, man up. Come on. So they exile their emotional feelings at this young age, and then they grow up where they're more focused on accomplishment, fixing, to do stuff, not the feelings. And then they meet these things that smell good and make their stomach flutter and get all goofy, and they speak a whole different language because of how they're socialized. And it's like missing each other. That's like all those books that came out years ago, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, or that video on YouTube of like she's got a nail on her head and she's trying to tell him how it feels, and all he wants to do is pull it out and fix it. And she's like, no, I just want you to hear me. It's the same. That's what that disconnect is. So men have exiled their feelings, and women are like, wait, where are you? Right? Like you said, I want to feel you. If I feel you and I feel connected to you, I feel safe because I know we're
Right,
simpatico. But if the
right.
man himself doesn't know his feelings, that's why, like, so then when his wife says, I don't know, I want to go visit my mother for the fourth weekend in a row, that's what we're going to do on Sunday. And he's like, I want to watch football, but he doesn't want to say that, or doesn't know how to say that, or doesn't know how to say, honey, I really love your mom, but it's a lot 4 weeks in a row. He
Yeah,
stuffs it and stuffs it. And it comes out, the two feelings that men can show generally in society are anger and sexual desire. So those feelings get stuffed in and they build resentment. And that's why a lot of women experience anger from men. They're like, well, even though they know they love them, why are you always angry? Why are you always mad? You're pissed off. Like, because that's the feel. It's a, right? It's a secondary emotion. So it's on top of
right,
whatever else they're feeling, but they don't know what's going on. And so part of the fear of men's fear of women is a fear of their own feelings. Like if, if if I was engaging with you and we're talking and you're having feelings, that's a mirror back to me about my feelings. And I'm
right.
like, oh, I can't feel my feelings. So what am I going to do? I'm going to tell you that you feel too much. You're too emotional, Dr. Kelly.
So this, I'm like, oh, you mean an HSP? And that
No, I didn't mean
actually,
that. I just meant as a woman. Yeah.
well, no, but
That's,
it kind of brings in a thought or something I was curious about your thoughts on highly sensitive men. Because when you were saying earlier, you're taught and given the messaging, and I want to back the train up a little bit because right now I am raising a young boy, right? And I'm raising a young boy, thankfully, with a man that is willing to be sensitive, which is amazing. And seeing how that can be so different when we allow that space, I'm really hopeful. I'm really hopeful that what is the generation we're in now? Gen Alpha?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
I'm
I
so
don't
bad with
even know.
that.
I don't know. Um,
Generation now. That's what it is. Yeah.
generation, yes, this one. If you're listening in 2025, but that this generation, my hope is that we are doing some repair around this. But it's crazy because it's kind of happening at the same collision to your point earlier, where there's this upheaval about toxic masculinity and Then you've got we need to raise sensitive boys, which is a message that's out there. I mean, I don't think it's completely new. It's a beautiful message,
Yeah.
but it's very it feels very polarized. Like it feels like we've got the will but maybe not the way yet or something.
I think people are figuring it out, I think, and I recently went to a retreat in Tennessee at a place called Onsite. They do different mental health programs there, and they have a trauma program. And it was a men's retreat for mental health people, men's leadership retreat for men working in the mental health profession, therapists, doctors, on the business side, things like that. 62 men. It was so nice. Like I was nervous to go, to be honest. I was nervous because like, are they going to want to be my friend? That I was nervous that way, but I was also
You
nervous
mean
like I find,
human emotions?
yeah, yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, are they going to like me? But I also was nervous. Like my experience has often been with men, one of two extremes recently. Either uber masculine, like
Mm-hmm.
when I've been to like different groups of men, it's like they swear or act tough beyond the pale of how tough you're supposed. Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
too much. It's ridiculous. Or men who are apologetic for being men. Like those two extremes I've seen a lot, and neither of them
Mm.
feel actually real to me. I
Right.
don't really connect to either of those. And so I was really pleased. Like these were just guys, they were all in different levels of vulnerability because they had to share different things. It was like, a lot, it was professional stuff, but also personal, emotional work. And it was beautiful. It was really beautiful. Like all these guys who are in various stages of their own healing journeys or whatever that is for them. Um, I was really moved by it. And you're right. Like, what does it mean to be a man, or what is masculinity? Is so it's confusing, it's not clear, it's so many definitions, and it's become a hot button topic because it's become
Right.
politicized.
Well, and I can also say, as a strong woman, which I would identify myself as a strong woman, I've been. What made you laugh about that?
Because I agree, and I was thinking about the contrast. They're both true, highly sensitive and strong woman. That's what made me laugh. But I feel that energy. I feel both of those from you, just from our last conversation and this one. I feel both, and they can coexist. But it felt true to me. That's why I laughed.
No, I loved it. It felt genuine. Well,
Yeah,
and to that point, like having that contrast, sometimes, and this brings back, I'm thinking of my own relationship and just with men in general, where being a quote strong woman can sometimes be one almost mislabeled as being masculine. I've heard different people who have different ideas of how they define masculinity. I even sometimes feel like I have a little thorn in my side if I'm in like a yoga session or something and they're like, okay, so you're going to hold this posture really strong and generating around your yang and your masculine and then breathe into your feminine and your yin. And I'm like, why do we have to like even make breathing gendered?
yeah.
You
Well,
know?
yeah. I mean, I think in different cultures, I was just the masculine represents something feminine, and it's often like feminine is softer. It's the attributes that we put towards men and women, right? Like masculine energy is generally stronger, whether it's spiritual, like words for God or nature, like masculine form are stronger, feminine are softer. Like it's in many cultures, and one could argue that creates, it perpetuates those beliefs, or or something else. Yeah.
So I wonder if maybe the masculine and feminine in that way is not necessarily gendered and more so individual.
And these are all broad stereotypes that, like you just described for yourself, right? Like you feel and describe yourself as a strong woman and very feminine at the same time. They're not contradictions, right? Like you're not what we would think of if someone said a masculine woman, they wouldn't picture you. They would picture someone, I don't know, wearing a flannel shirt. I don't know, like all the stereotypes that we have in
They
our
would
culture.
picture me when I used to play rugby.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, in a rugby shirt. Yeah. So we have these stereotypes, but the reality is, I have masculine and feminine energy. The way we would use those terms, I have those energies.
Mm-hmm.
I know women who have more masculine energy than I do,
Mm.
you know.
So when I was thinking about that like strong female essence, what do you have to say for men who are in relationships with strong females? And I say this as definitely the more assertive, extroverted yang essence in my own relationship. And I want to leave room for him to be his full self, but I also don't want to lose myself.
Right. Um, I think it takes a secure man. I think
Mm-hmm.
it takes a secure person to be with a strong person.
Hmm.
So I think it takes a secure man to be with a strong woman. And I think it takes a secure woman to be with a strong man. Like otherwise they're both forms of unhealthy dependency and
Mm.
insecurity. So I do know that I've had many women, female friends who have been like, what we would call strong, very successful. And they've shared with me that in their dating experiences, it was hard to find
Mm-hmm.
men at times that were not threatened by them.
Mm.
And, it makes me sad, both because it was hard, it was arduous for them to find someone, but also, um, ideally, like our partners, the better our partners are, the stronger they are, the more they fly, the healthier the relationship.
Mm.
Right? We
And
want to encourage all of that.
right. And you said it was a client or a woman or a peer that you knew who was struggling with dating?
Friends, a couple friends of mine, yeah.
Friends, couple friends.
I've had
You know,
clients like that too, yeah.
right. Something that I find really crucial and important, and I would imagine you most likely echo this, but for me is who you bring to the table. I mean, obviously we all are a little masked when we're first meeting people to an extent, but who you bring to the table in the beginning, I mean, I think it's such a good barometer to get a more true depiction if this person can handle your strong. And I say that almost like I remember the first moment that I was attracted to my husband and he was attracted to me, and we kind of knew each other through friends for a couple weeks first. We were at this party and I remember we're like standing on this balcony and we started talking about music, and he mentioned a band, My Morning Jacket, if anyone's ever heard of them. Have you heard of them?
I've heard of
Have
them once. Yeah, yeah,
You have? Okay.
yeah.
He likened them to the Beatles. And I burst out laughing. I gave him so much shit about it. I was like, really? Like, you're really going to compare the two? And I went on to
Right,
this whole, like, I don't know, this whole thing about it. I had a little TED talk about it. I just was myself. I just didn't care. Right.
right.
And the fact that he could handle that, like the fact that he kind of was there for it, he wasn't offended by me. He was more kind of drawn to that energy. And then likewise, he liked that energy was a good, I guess, kind of like way to attract strength to
Hmm.
balance that. Now, I'm not saying that, perpetuates forever in this lovely honeymoon essence 15 years later, but
No, but I mean, to me, it says that he was able to handle disagreement or criticism, right? Like when someone doesn't have that ability, and I think that's a big thing around men and this topic with women, but when they feel criticized or disagreed with, it might activate shame. And then men, since they can't show weakness, what the basic shame reaction they have is they get bigger or shut down. So that kind of makes a relationship hard. And it's one of the areas where I think many women in relationships learn they, to use that phrase I said before about, suck it up. And unfortunately, just accept bad behavior from men where they either storm out of the room, they shut down emotionally. And it's like, oh, that's what they do. And it's hard and it hurts their hearts, but they kind of tolerate it because these men, that's what they're shaped that way, but there's no point where they grow out of it to kind of evolve into this more mature of like, I can respond to an uncomfortable feeling in an adult way and without regressing to act like a 10-year-old who's in trouble from his mommy and either throws a tantrum and gets defensive, or storms out of the room, or shuts down. And I've done all of those, all of them. And that's what it was for me. It's all shame reaction. This sensitivity of like, you say something like, the dishes are still, the dishes are in the sink. Oh, what, you want me to do them all the time? And then boom, it's like it's heard through a lens of shaming criticism. And partially that's, I think, a lot of men struggle with. And also, if you grow up in a house where that's the currency, then you have a very hair trigger for that too.
What do you think about over apologizing?
Men over apologizing?
Yes, we've talked about, and this is for the sake of our conversation today. Many of us know about women over apologizing societally. That is an unfortunate fact that we always have to work on. But I notice, I guess I'm saying this kind of personally, I notice almost like it's like a knee jerk, like apology
Yeah.
that doesn't feel like there's anything behind it. It just feels like
Yeah.
it might be a little bit of a shame response.
Yeah. It's like, well, there's a shame response, or it's kind of like saying, when someone says, you say hello to someone instead of you say, how are you? You're not really asking, how are you? You're saying it's a greeting. And there are certain people who grow up and they learn, like, as soon as they get in trouble, they have to say they're sorry. That's ingrained in them for whatever reason. And sometimes it's a way to shut down the conversation. I remember, this one couple I was working, several couples I've worked with, where usually the husband, if the wife was upset about something, he would just agree right away. Eventually you run out of steam. And he would do it to me too. And I'd be like, I'm not finished talking and I appreciate what you're saying, but I just want you to listen. And that's how I was able to realize what it feels like for his wife, because I was like, this doesn't feel satisfying to me that you're just agreeing with me. Like, it's a strategy. You probably unconscious, so you have to make them aware of it. Like, when you do this is how I feel. It makes me feel like you're just shutting me down. And I don't feel that we resolved it. And
Yeah,
then your behavior continuing also shows that we didn't
right.
resolve it. But yeah.
So can you say, and I definitely want to approach the anger piece, the actual response to carrying shame around. But before we get there, the shame in general, you had said you can get, and men tending to get either big or shutting down. So I'm very curious when you said getting bigger or getting smaller, almost kind of like getting explosive or shutting down. What would you specifically say to a man who's listening to this episode who wants to stop doing one of those two things and wants to feel more comfortable? What should they do?
Yeah, that's a great question, the way you phrased it. In my experience, and I had a supervisor who taught me this, there's like 4 common shame responses that people have. Somehow, we all do all of them, but some of us are specialists. We do 1 or 2 most. We either attack ourselves, like, oh, I'm such an idiot. I'm so mad, at myself. I attack myself internally. We attack others. What are you talking about? You do that too. Da, 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 da. You like go at them. We withdraw, isolate, storm out of the room, silent treatment, or we distract, like get busy or other
Oh,
things like that.
okay.
So those are all 4. So I usually teach them to clients as, as a backwards way of finding out if you're in shame. So if they find themselves withdrawing, attacking themselves, they're like, oh, let me see if I check in and see if I'm feeling shame. Because often they're not even aware they're feeling shame. They're feeling like, how dare you say that? Or, so what I would do is encourage someone to notice when their partner or anyone says something to them that they take in critically, and what's your response? Most likely, if you're over 20 years old or you've had multiple relationships, you've probably heard from multiple partners over the years
Well,
the same feedback. Why are you so angry all the time? Or,
why won't you
you
say
know,
something?
why won't you say something? How can you even talk to
Hmm.
me for 3 days? Or why did you stomp out? I'm just going to pull the curtains because I see the shade happening.
Yeah,
Just
go for
capiza.
it.
I don't know. It's that fault. We're still getting used to the tiger kids. The sun.
It happens to a lot of folks that I chat. Ooh, now you look
Oh,
like
yeah.
you're in jail.
Oh, really? Oh, why? Is there a line down me?
Only if you stay back, you're fine. If you lean forward, you look like you're in the
Okay.
bars.
Uh,
We'll keep you
please,
boxed in where you belong.
please let me out. Please let me out early. I promise I'll behave. No. Yeah. So I would invite them if they're able to be curious about how they respond in non-productive ways when they're in when they have a conflict, a rupture with their partner. And I also invite them to ask their partner if they want the extra credit to say, to give them feedback. Hey, when we have when you tell me something that's critical, how do how do I respond? I'm curious. You're the person that's observing it. Give me
Yeah.
some feedback. Like at work,
I
right? How did I? Yeah.
You just no, you just blew my mind because like I'm envisioning, well, first of all, I love the visual because you've got the I almost saw like a box. Like you're going inward, you're going
Yeah.
outward, you're going out of the box completely, or you're hitting yourself with the box. I don't know, like
Yeah.
something like that. But I'm envisioning being on the receiving end of someone who's feeling shame, maybe unwarranted, like maybe there's that fear dynamic. And if they looked at me and said, "Okay, I'm noticing I'm reacting by by speaking unkindly to myself, or I'm noticing a shame response. What are you noticing?" That would be so validating. Like I
Yeah.
feel like whatever the issue was going on would dissolve so quickly.
Yeah. It's not easy to do. That's why I
No,
say it's
not
the
at
extra
all. This
credit
is like
question.
way higher order stuff.
Yeah. And also I think many men, I know I experienced this, it was a revelation to me. We underestimate the level of our response. I used to think I was responding proportionally to what was being said to me. Like I'm getting met with anger, I'm responding with an equal level of anger. And I got consistent feedback that my anger was bigger than what they were doing. So first I thought they're just hypocrites. They don't see it. They're blind to themselves. I'm so much more self-aware. But eventually it started to sink in. And I also understood also from my size, you know, and often men, not always, but often men are bigger than a female counterpart. But that I would get big, right? Because part of masculinity, you can't show weakness. So when you feel bad, you can't just run away. That shows weakness. You can't fall apart. So you have to get bigger. Fight, flight, or freeze. Fight is your basic only option, which is why many men respond with fight versus freeze or fawn even. Um, yeah, so I think that eventually, if like ideally, we don't want to be having the same fight for the rest of our life or for all of our
Of
relationships. Like,
course. Of course.
so
Yeah.
eventually it's like, this isn't working. So we can go around the same dynamic and do the same dance again. And just, that's where
Hmm.
couples like slowly start to move apart, you
You
know?
know, it makes me think of when I was first working as a therapist, I worked at one of those boot camps where kids were sent for like a
Oh yeah.
year, and
Mm.
it was actually a boys' camp. So I was working with all these teenage boys who, for up until that point, had never really expressed themselves. And
Yeah.
now they're thrown into this scenario where every day they had to do group ups where they would like process everything. I mean, it was like you went from one extreme to the
Mm.
other. But one of the like metaphors that came out of one of those sessions, because I'm working with teens, so I'm trying to make it, adaptable, was this idea of like a carbonated soda bottle. And if every time something happens and you don't say something, you shake the bottle, but you keep the lid on, right? And then eventually the lid's going to come off and it explodes everywhere. It's a big mess. Everyone has to clean it up. It's a tragedy if it ends
Yeah.
up on your white carpet or something, whatever.
Yeah.
But then I like the idea that if you have the cap just like slightly unscrewed at all times, you're slowly letting the pressure off all the time. And so it makes me think of a term I use with my clients that we've just kind of come up with is casual vulnerability.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
instead of this, okay, I have to wait for the perfect time, I have to wait until Friday night at 7 and everything's done. When honestly, at those times, sometimes you don't want to ruin the good time by talking
Yeah.
about tough stuff. That if you integrate how do I really feel about this? And you're constantly letting the pressure off, just casually, like, I really didn't love when you did such and such. And it's just easy and casual and part of your everyday vernacular with someone. It doesn't have to be these huge monumental expressions. And so starting with something small, like you were saying much earlier in our conversation, okay, maybe not going to the in-laws house because that feels a little bit bigger, but maybe something like, I'm not in the mood to watch this show tonight. Could we watch something else? Like
Yeah.
just individuating even that bit is kind of a way of unscrewing the cap a little.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I the word I think of when you describe that is like micro stuffs. These small stuffs that they just keep. I don't, they don't say I don't want to watch the show. They can't be out. They don't show up authentically fully, and so they have all these stuffs where that alone that would be fine, but it keeps building up until it explodes, usually in a fit of anger that's disproportionate to what's happening in the here and now and catches their partner by surprise.
Mm. And
Or they
you
just live in resentment at their partner and then they might seek out like attention from someone else instead.
attention from someone else, or maybe attention or focus on like a substance,
Yes. Yeah.
substance use, or even the fact that suicidal thoughts are more prevalent in men, although
Yeah.
high statistics in women as well. But it really, to me, speaks of like what happens when you're constantly stuffing
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so men don't realize that they're stuffing. Because first maybe because of that split that happens internally when they're boys, they're not fully emotionally literate. Not all, obviously, we're speaking broadly, but many men don't have like what I would call emotional literacy. So they don't know that they're hurt. They're thinking they're pissed off, or they're thinking they're fine. I would joke like the three emotional check-ins are fine, okay, and tired. Those are my three emotional states,
Mm, I
or
could see
angry.
that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So they don't know a broader gamut of like, I'm feeling minimized. I feel insulted by what you said, or I feel
Hmm.
rejected because I thought it's our date night and you made plans with your sister instead. And I feel like I'm not important to you, or you prioritize the kids and not me. And so it builds up and they don't know how to articulate it. And if sharing feelings often equals asking for needs or wants, and
Hmm.
that being needy, that implies weakness. So all that masculinity stuff as boys wipes away the ability to
Can you hear
ask
my
for
dog
need.
barking?
Yeah, it's a
I think he's going to stop in a sec. I hope he stops. He's going to wake up my almost almost 5-year old. Like,
oh,
I know. I'm like, he's so sensitive too. My 5-year old, he's so my 4 almost 5-year old, he's so sweet. Like lots of I love yous, lots. Oh, he's so sweet.
yeah, so lucky, You're
Hmm.
so lucky. I mean, my father is a wonderful man, very loving,
Hmm.
um, but that wasn't part of our vocabulary growing up. Like many people our age, older, younger, a little younger, like I always picture like these full life-size cutouts of Michael Jordan or Derek Jeter or LeBron James. I'm dating myself with the athletes, but when they started making those,
Hmm. Babe
um,
Ruth. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah,
Not putting you that far back.
yeah, but they're one dimensional, right? And so I think that
Hmm.
that's kind of how I saw my dad growing up. Not for he didn't do anything wrong, but that's all he was shown too. So
Wow. Yeah.
I I didn't have insight into his emotional world. I just saw his world of action. And me as a man now and as a father, I've tried to find a balance between I want to show and model I have two boys. I want to model for them an emotional world, but not burden them with my emotions.
Oh, I
So I
love how
want
you
to,
put that.
yeah, because I'm still the adult, right?
Right.
So like I don't want to dump all my stuff on them and like parentify them and stuff. So but I want to still show them. So I choose things that I'll share with them, like I'm struggling, I'm frustrated, I'm sad, all a range of emotions to kind of model it for them, but not in a way that will burden them, hopefully. And I
I
probably
love that.
done that, not even just despite trying to do that.
Well, that's being
I'm sure I
human,
have
but
actually. Yeah, yeah,
in effect, what I'm hearing you say is that part of teaching boys and men not to fear women means that we need other men, not just women, but other men to open the door and encourage and say it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to really be human because in actuality, I mean, I think about on the receiving end when you were talking about not seeing you were saying you hadn't seen your father cry. Is that what you were saying?
I didn't see him cry till his father's funeral.
And I feel like too many of us have that kind of story. And
Yeah,
it's almost become a cultural norm to say, have you ever seen your dad cry? Almost like this kind of like check, like a temperature check
yeah.
on the masculinity or the type of dad. And I will say on the receiving end, I remember the day of my wedding, as right before we're about to go down the aisle, my dad said something super meaningful to me, and I saw tears in his eyes, and it was like so amazing to be on the receiving end of that.
Mm.
Like it was so incredible and just like it made me feel so much closer and validated and it just made the moment amazing. And so
Hmm.
these emotions, they serve a purpose. They're not just manufactured for no reason.
Yeah,
They do everything from help us with our immune health and our longevity and our relationships. And I kind of feel bad for anyone, man or woman, who doesn't experience that full scope. It doesn't have
yeah,
a space and safe space to do that.
yeah. And I think at the same time, while wanting men to feel more in touch with their emotions and be more emotional, um, I think the way men experience feelings, even when they do, is still different than the way women do. So sometimes I wouldn't even use the crying as a barometer. Like they might be feeling and expressing their pain in a different way. Like it's a silly example, maybe, but I taught middle school for many years, and boys would say hello in seventh, sixth, seventh, eighth grade by running up and hitting each other. That's how they say hi.
Yeah.
Or they even to girls as they started to translate into connecting with girls, and they didn't before they learned they have to speak a different language to girls, pulling their hair to say I like you, right? Like what is that? That's so I think even as adults, like men have their own flavor of being emotionally literate, different than women sometimes. And so, like I would say to my partner, um, give me a second. I don't know. I want to say this the right way. Everything that you feel is important to me, and if you want, and I want you to share it with me if it's important to you, and I'm here for it. And at the same time, I'm not one of your girlfriends, meaning I connect with you in many different ways, and like her and her girlfriends like to sit and talk and pull it apart. And I, more than most men, I think I do that too, more than many, many, many men. But it's not the only way I connect, and I do it differently than her and her girlfriends do. So I do think that there's like different flavors, even with being emotionally connected as a man, that men will express themselves differently. So the goal is not
Right.
to be like a woman or for a woman to be like a man. It's like to be what you're, who you are in the way that you are, but to be in touch with your feelings and find ways to let people in and to let people let you in.
It almost makes me think that it's like, it reminds me of when you're first working with a client who doesn't have a good emotional vocabulary necessarily, and you show them the feelings chart or whatever, and, kind of talk about different layers of feelings and how sometimes if you don't have that vocabulary, it can be very limiting. And your point about the boys pulling the ponytails, um, it's interesting because there's this other little part of me that I don't know. Yeah, I bristled a moment at that because on this like other end, there's this thought about, I don't want to bring up the word consent, but I'm going to, around consent
Yeah.
and like us changing the script about how we show affection and changing the script like
Yes.
that old like, oh, the little boy in the sandbox throwing the sand, he must like her. Like
Yeah.
I really hope we can work from a very young age on how we can give the emotional language and vocabulary to everyone, but
Yes.
to boys, so that, maybe they can resort to something other than tugging the ponytail.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I haven't thought of that. That's a
Hmm.
really good point.
Coming from a strong woman.
No, I appreciate it. It made me pause and think about it. Yeah.
Hmm. So I'm curious, thinking about everything that we chatted about today. Again, I love our conversations because you have like this salient point and then you have all these different offshoots and avenues that come off of it. But what would you say is the main essence of how you think we as a society or anyone listening to this today can look at their own relationships and bring more of a balanced feeling instead of a fear feeling
Hmm.
going forward?
Yeah. Well, can I give a semi-long answer to that? Would that be okay?
Please. Yes,
Okay.
of
So,
course.
because I want
Bullet
to also
points.
answer, yeah, I want to also answer your question from earlier, which was, what are men's fears of women? So there's a couple I
Mhm.
want to go through, just name, I'll bullet
Yeah,
point
yeah,
them,
yeah.
but that relates because I
Please.
think so. I think that uh, paying attention to see how these show up in a relationship. Men fear being controlled or dominated by women. I used to joke that "you're not the boss of me" would be put on my tombstone. Like I'll just say, like when I went through, there's a couple books I read and kind of did some of this work preparing this talk. For the first time I gave it, it wrecked me more than almost any other talk I've ever given. Like it was so cutting to the core of so many things that I saw in myself. It was like, in fact, people in my house said that we've never seen you like this when you've had to give a talk. Like for about 2 months, it affected me. But that feeling of, I used to joke like, and then sometimes I wouldn't say it, but I'd feel it like, "Don't tell me what to do." And I remember running a group one time of men that I had for several years, and we were talking about honesty in relationships, and one of them said, "Yeah, sometimes I lie to my wife, even though it's not a bad thing. I'll come home from work and she'll be like, 'What'd you have for lunch?' And I'll say, 'I had a tuna fish salad,' and really I had I don't know, an equally healthy salad or sandwich. But I don't like her asking me questions because it feels like she's controlling me. And I didn't understand
Oh,
what you meant. And all the
yeah.
guys are like, 'Oh, I get that.' But that's part of what this is. So like fear of being controlled, fear of being entrapped by women, and all this whole thing, the old ball and chain,
Right.
like
It came from somewhere.
statistics. Yeah. Statistics
Hmm.
show that men's lives improve by getting into a relationship.
Mm.
Their living, where they live improves. The amount of food in their refrigerator improves. Their
Hmm.
health improves. Their happiness improves. How often they have sex improves. Their income improves. But yet there's this feeling of like
Hmm.
getting married or committing to a relationship. I'm like trapped, and it's a concession when
Mm.
they're choosing it. And
Right.
a friend of mine, I remember I was at the gym with him, and he had this picture of a ball and chain and a date and a location. I'm like, "What is that?" He's like, "Oh, that was my brother-in-law's bachelor party."
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, "Dude, like that's what we're entering into a relationship or marriage or a committed
Hmm.
relationship with. Of like, I'm giving up all this amazing stuff when actually statistics show I'm getting more than I'm giving up, much better life. So
Hmm.
feeling of being entrapped, um, fear of not being able to protect a woman.
Hmm. Okay.
That fear I think a lot of men have. Fear of women's emotions. Like when women get all emotional, men go like, it's like stone face. It's like, and that's why our whole profession started by men pathologizing women with hysteria and sending them to
Absolutely.
Freud.
Hmm.
So,
Hello, gaslighting.
yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Fear of being inadequate. Men
Mm.
have that like to a woman. Fear of being abandoned by women.
Hmm.
And finally, I think fear of being feminine.
Mm. Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a so each of those could be a whole episode. But
I
what
know.
I was to answer
Stay
your
tuned.
question, yeah, right. I'm happy to talk about any of them another time. But what I would say is, well, it doesn't feel like these are showing up in the relationship,
Mm.
right? Like when we're having a fight, a couple's having a fight about something, and the way they're fighting and the way, let's say, the man is reacting in the fight, doesn't kind of demonstrate one of these things,
Mm-hmm.
So if a man is like being really difficult and uh, just being stubborn on certain things, like what's going on? Like those are important to him for those specific reasons, or maybe it's fear of feeling trapped and controlled by a woman.
I like that because instead of it being about, and I think this happens in couples counseling a lot, where if you just focus on the nitty gritty, like if you're just focusing on you eating a healthy salad or something for lunch, the
Yeah,
argument becomes about an external thing
yeah,
versus, oh, okay, this is triggering your fear of control. Let's talk about that.
right,
Like, so you actually get to talk about the real thing instead of
right.
the overlayer to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of different, um, I think reasons why it happens, and there's a lot of. I'm sorry. There's a lot of defenses against these fears, like um, getting big and loud is a defense against these fears. Men's intellectualizing and arguing, they start logicking. That's not a word, but like being super logic is a avoidance of those feelings. And there's reasons why it happens. Part of it, like I said earlier, I think is masculinity stuff, cultural, familiar. Some of it is evolutionary, but there's just a lot of different um, reasons. I think also, there's this thing that happens to men that we don't really pay attention to, but there's a boys, but early caregivers are always often female, predominantly female. Um, the mom, the grandmother, the aunts. Early childhood teachers are usually women. And at some point, little boys go from this world of like femininity, feminine energy, feminine warmth and love, which is a certain feel, right? It's like very sweet and holding and it's beautiful. But then they get ripped out of it around fifth grade, maybe third grade, fifth grade, depending. And also biologically start to identify more with their dad. So they go into that world. But and the messaging of masculinity is like, you can't really be too dependent on your mom. If you
So then you're
need your
called a
mom,
mama's boy.
you're a mama's boy, you're weak, you're all these
Hmm.
other words that I don't know about the policies of your podcast, but I won't say them here, but
You can say
people
whatever
know.
you want to say.
But so there's this in this healthy learning to individuate, but it can also create pain. But if you show any pain for not being as close to your mom, you're mocked and you're degraded. So there's something in there, I think, in the evolution too, that then it reinforces these fears, these feelings around women. Like, I don't want to be too dependent again because it hurt so bad when I was a little boy.
This makes me feel so much better about, like I was saying to you earlier, I have a very sensitive little boy and also it's funny, very sensitive in the way that we would imagine sensitive, and then also, rough and tumble, and half of our time at Disney World was spent telling him not to stab people with the foam sword he had, so it's like it's kind of that duality.
Pirates of the Caribbean, or
No,
yeah.
we did the Bippity Boppity Boutique, and we brought him in, and they have a knight's package, and so he was dressed like a knight, and my daughter. It was so damn cute. But
That shows how long it's been since I've been to Disney. Yeah.
yeah, this was somewhat recent, but that makes me feel so much joy in thinking about. And I guess if anyone here is listening to this right now, and you have a little boy you're raising,
That's not
like,
true. My boys are in their 30s,
oh well, okay, well, so what I was about to
but
say
they're
though
also
is,
sensitive too.
well, what I was about to say is, like, if you have one that you're currently raising that's in your
Yeah.
home.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's okay. If you have one that you're currently raising and they're in your home, involve the dad in the nurturing. Like,
Mhm.
invite him into it and let him be part of those early times so that when they transition into the next phase, it's not that abrupt drop off. It's even if it's something as simple as like reading stories together as a family, or you know, if your child's upset, like it doesn't have to just be me comforting, it can be both of us. Like I don't have to be the only one that holds him and pats his back when he hurts himself. So my hope is for anyone listening, if you don't feel like you have that kind of relationship right now, maybe this is a great episode to listen to
Yeah.
encourage that kind of dynamic so we can raise boys who are in touch with that, feel comfortable with that, and will feel less fearful overall of, all genders. So, Gary, I love talking to you. Thank you so much for coming back. You
It's my
also opened
pleasure.
up all these other, I was like, ooh, subcategories.
I would love to, anytime you want to chat, I'm happy to. I really enjoy it. And
Absolutely.
I feel honored that you have me again. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for coming back and good luck at your symposium.
Thank you.
Symposium, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And for anyone who wants to, keep up with you and stay connected because you have a whole center you have
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
are helping the world. So where can they find all that?
Yeah. The Center for Intimacy, which is based in New York, but we're in, I think, 7 states right now: Florida, Texas,
Wow.
California, Virginia, Vermont, Maryland, I think. I'm missing one.
You know you're big when you can't
Oh, New
remember where you
Jersey and
are.
Connecticut. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's all about a lot of couples counseling, a lot of individual, and we do a lot of group counseling too. We run a lot of groups, but it's all about ways that people can be more intimate with themselves, know themselves better, and then also in turn let others to know them and get to know others better. So sometimes that happens with people who are struggling to know themselves because they're doing all the things they learned to avoid knowing themselves because it was too painful,
Mm,
or the strategies that they learned as a child and then as an adult. So it's unwinding those, and sometimes it's people seeking a closer relationship. Like
hmm
we love each other and we keep tripping over the same thing.
hmm
So yeah, that's the practice Center for Intimacy, and our web. The easiest way is to go to our website, which is intimacyrecovery.com. And also, if people have questions, I always invite them to email me. And whether, I may not be able to see them as a client, but either answer a question or have a conversation, which I'd love to, or recommend direct them in a treatment plan or something. And that they can email me at my name, which is Gary, Gary, Katz, Katz, at intimacyrecovery.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Gary. I hope
Pleasure.
everyone enjoyed this episode and be well.